everybody, welcome to Life is Beautiful. I'm Anthony. Today we're going to be doing a hop overview. It is the segment of my channel where we take a specific hop varietal and we do a deep dive into its history, into its utilization and its purpose in the grander scheme of beer and beer brewing. Today is going to be a little bit of a different one. Not only are we going to talk and focus on one specific hop varietal, but it's actually more so of an umbrella term that includes three distinct yet possibly the exact same hop varietals. I know that sounds a bit confusing, but I will explain. Additionally, we're going to be talking about the potential felonious history behind this. I mean, there's a significant chance that this hop varietal is actually illegal. We're going to be talking about CTZ. Now, before we get too deep into this, I do need to say that there's a little bit of a disclaimer that goes with this video. I usually try to do my best to corroborate all my research, make sure that everything fits up, matches, and things that don't corroborate with other sources aren't included, just so we get the clearest, truest, most defined picture. I can't necessarily do that with the CTZ hop because there's so much clouded obfuscation around this story. And because of its possibly illegal nature, I need to be able to say that this is all speculative, this is hearsay, this is not found to be exactly truthful. It's just allegations being made against. No way is anything I say definitive when regarding the potential illegal nature of this hop. So the first thing we need to do is actually explain what CTZ is. CTZ is not a specific hop varietal like I assumed it was for the longest point in time. It's actually an umbrella term that covers three possibly different hop varietals, and that would be Columbus, Tomahawk, and Zeus. These individual hop varietals are actually allegedly the exact same hop varietal. They're just sold and marketed under different distributors, and they all have their own individual trademarks, so it has to have a different name. It's for this reason why you'll oftentimes see any of these individual CTZ hop brands as the substitution for any other of the CTZ hop brands, to include just the blanket CTZ category. But for clarity's sake, we are just going to refer to it as CTZ throughout the rest of this story. So getting into CTZ's utilization, CTZ is actually a part of the super alpha family, meaning that on average, year after year, it has a baseline alpha acid content of 15% or higher, meaning that it's one of the best hops for creating an intense bitter flavor in beer. CTZ is capable of providing flavors like muddled spice, black licorice, fresh herbs, and mild citrus twangs, and some distributors have actually used those characteristics to market it as a dual-purpose hop. Although, I don't think I've ever seen any beer ever with any CTZ brand as like an aroma hop or as a late addition. It's pretty much consistently used at being bitter. And it's incredibly good at doing so. I mean, I was surprised to find CTZ, when you combine all three brands, is actually the second most utilized hop in the world. Although it is important to state that since the 2000s, most CTZ brands have been on a general decline since they are very subjective to things like mildew and disease and pests. Also a strong shift towards less bitter, more aromatic hop styles, putting CTZ on the back burner despite its still near constant utilization in the current craft beer scene. And it's so good and so adept at being used in almost any beer style because it's basically just a blank slate of bitterness. You only have to use a little bit to get the IBU that you're looking for. It can be found in porters, IPAs, barley wines, stouts, whatever. Anything that you need to have a little bit of a bitterness to, it's capable of providing for you. Okay, so now that we know what CTZ is and we know how it's utilized, let's talk a little bit more about that felonious history I was mentioning earlier. So it's completely unknown when exactly CTZ was first bred. But we do know that it really started making its public debut around 1979 in Washington. The birth and the breeding of CTZ is commonly attributed to a man known as Charles Chuck Zimmerman. Chuck Zimmerman is one of the most famous hop breeders of all time. And in 1979, he was preparing to retire from the federal government working as a hop breeder for the USDA Hop Research in Prosser, Washington. As Mr. Zimmerman was preparing for retirement, he knew that he was going to transition into the private sector, working with hop breeders, hop growers, hop distributors. And he made the conclusion that there was not going to be anyone around who was adequately trained or knowledgeable enough to be able to carry on all his years of research that he did in hop breeding. So allegedly, what Mr. Zimmerman did was take what he called the most valuable hop breeding material out of the federal USDA laboratories and took it to his private property where he continued to propagate such material. Allegedly, what he took was either the parents or actually a prototype of what would eventually become known as CTZ. Shortly after moving to the private sector, Mr. Zimmerman's private collection of hop breeding materials were becoming incredibly valuable. See, at this point in time, the federal government had actually changed copyright law. They had made it where you're actually able to put a copyright on specific plant-based materials. So you could include hops in that, and each hop varietal was legally protected by copyright. Hop distributors, hop sellers, hop marketers, and even hop growers, they were going crazy trying to buy up and gain the rights to specific hop varietals. That way they could make it proprietary. They were the only ones who would be able to market this, the only ones who would be able to grow it and sell it. And if anyone else wanted to, they'd have to pay royalties or buy it outright or buy a license to it or whatever. I don't know. But the point was, Mr. Zimmerman had all of this alleged federally researched hop material, hop varietals, and he was making hand over fist selling it. Now, it's at this point that I think it's very important to understand what is being alleged here, what's being levied against Mr. Zimmerman. If the whole theft from the USDA research facility is true, he could, at a minimum, be facing charges like theft of property or the selling of stolen property, or even just simply theft and possession of stolen government property, which is a felony in and of itself. But when you take into consideration how much money he was selling it for, how much money was being made off of it, you could be looking at grand theft charges, which could eventually end up with like 10 to 20 years if you were to be prosecuted and found guilty of. To make matters worse, the allegations state that Mr. Zimmerman was actually selling the exact same hop varietal to different companies, claiming it to be its own unique thing. That's how we ended up with Columbus, Tomahawk, and Zeus all being genetically identical, yet marketed and sold under different brands. He was pulling the wool over people's eyes. I mean, he was basically screwing over his business partners and his retailers and eventually his customers. But again, it is very important to state that these are all just allegations. To add to the mystique of CTZ, nobody truly knows what its lineage is. I mean, because it was potentially, stolen research material, experimental hop varietals that were used to create CTZ, there was no true way of being able to completely decipher it. And as far as I was able to find, there's no definitive genealogical studies on CTZ that are conclusive enough to determine where it came from. It just came from Mr. Zimmerman's private stock. So it is a little bit mysterious, and I would love to see some additional research on that. And Mr. Zimmerman was pressed on that several times throughout his career. People were like, where did this come from? How did you come up with it? Blah, blah, blah. And he would never divulge any information. Probably that way it couldn't be used against him, and that way he could maintain a good legal defense if he was ever brought to task. But it just never was. There's just so much mystery surrounding the CTZ mythos. Unfortunately, all of that mystery would go to the grave with Mr. Zimmerman, who passed away in 2009. He never told, never divulged, never leaked any secrets behind it, but the controversy behind it and the mystery behind it has intrigued researchers for years to come. So I really don't know how to end the story. Usually things are pretty clear cut, finished and dry, done with. But with CTZ, there's just so much mystery. I wish I knew more. I wish I had more to give you. But I mean, at the end of the day, all we really know is that Mr. Zimmerman sold it and that it is an incredibly popular hop used for bittering. Who knows if the allegations are true? Who knows what CTZ really is? It's a great mystery. It's one of the greatest mysteries in beer and hop breeding history. It's incredibly fascinating. Anyways, like, comment, subscribe. Remember, there is a story in every bottle, some more interesting than others, and that life is beautiful. Cheers, y'all.